Tonight on Reporting Scotland, ScotRail and the RMT union agree on a deal to end the dispute over driver-only operated trains. The fight for the skies over the capital, Edinburgh Airport, receives thousands of responses to a consultation on changing its flight paths.
One every 2 minutes, a few thousand feet above you, rattling the air is very unpleasant.
Also on the programme, Willie Rennie tells the Lib Dem conference that the SNP and the Conservatives are the terrible twins of British politics. Rangers suspend Joey Barton for 3 weeks following a training ground argument. And going the extra mile, the runner who's about to tackle his 100th ultra-marathon. Good evening. ScotRail says it's reached agreement in principle with the RMT union to end a dispute over driver-only operated trains. The company says it includes a guarantee that a conductor will be kept as a second member of staff on new trains being rolled out next year. Here's Hugh Williams with the latest.
This dispute's always been about who operates the doors on train services. Do you need a guard or can the driver do everything? The RMT said having a second member of staff working on a train is vital for passenger safety. But now ScotRail says the deal, which has been agreed in principle, guarantees that that second person will be there. It should mean an end to the industrial action which disrupted some trains earlier in the year. In fact, more strikes were planned, but they were suspended early this month to allow strikes to go ahead. ScotRail has welcomed the development. It says it'll make its services more effective and efficient. The union says its officials will be reporting to the RMT National Executive tomorrow, where the proposals will be considered in detail. It'll make its position clear after that, but there'll need to be a ballot of union members to ratify the deal. What I think we can confidently predict is that both sides will be claiming that they've won.
Hugh, thank you. Edinburgh Airport says it's received thousands of responses to its public consultation on changing flight paths. The first phase ends today, a week later than planned, after the airport was forced to apologise after losing almost 200 responses. Lisa Summers reports.
Scotland's busiest airport is getting even more popular. Passenger numbers are up 12% on this time last year. And it plans to expand. Just the sort of news owners of this West Lothian golf club say they want to hear.
Certainly the airport expansion will hopefully raise the profile of the area and raise the profile of West Lothian. The more people we can draw to the area and the more awareness we can make of our golf club and other clubs in this area can only be good.
To grow, Edinburgh Airport wants to attract more flights in, but it also wants to increase the frequency of outbound flights to 1 a minute. And to do that, it says it wants to expand the flight paths it uses.
This consultation gave the public their say on proposed envelopes of airspace that could be utilised.
But it's when they did the trials and they changed the flight path of the...
In some parts of the countryside, like Blackness, local residents say the tranquility has already disappeared.
We're fighting against a giant and we're a small group of people because of the rural area. There's not that many people live here and it's like David and Goliath.
One every 2 minutes, a few thousand feet above you, rattling the air is very unpleasant.
The airspace here was designed in the 1970s. Back then it handled around 1 million passengers a year. Now it handles over 11 million. The modernisation programme has had a bumpy ride, a cancelled flight path trial, last week an admission of lost data. But the airport say it is listening.
We have a chance to redesign the sky above Edinburgh Airport. We can now design routes that better balance our growth with their requirements as well. So we can look to try and alleviate some of the problems that are there already through a variety of things, either modernising the flight routes or using different routes at different times.
The airport say the results of this phase will inform their designs, but no changes to airspace will take place before December 2017. Lisa Summers, Reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
The leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats has accused the SNP and the Conservatives of campaigning on fear, not hope, in his speech to the party's conference. Willie Rennie said the Lib Dems needed to be progressive, optimistic and outward-looking. Our political correspondent David Porter is in Brighton, and they're not the party of government they were 2 years ago, David, are they?
No, they're not, and that's, I think, part of the reason the language we're hearing from Willie Rennie this evening. He is very keen, like other senior Liberal Democrats, to get a hearing for his views. Over the last couple of years, with the UK general election and the Holyrood elections early this year, I think it's fair to say that the Liberal Democrats are feeling pretty marginalised at the moment. They, of course, only have one Scottish Liberal Democrat MP at Westminster and 5 MSPs. So to that end, Willie Rennie is saying that his party will be progressive, it will be outward-looking and it will be optimistic. But Willie Rennie is acutely aware that in political times, the only show in town at the moment is Brexit and the reaction to that, hence the comments he has been making today. He has accused both the SNP and the Tories of trying to make party political advantage of that EU referendum almost 3 months ago now.
It is a dismal scene that has been visited upon us by the Conservatives and the SNP. Stalled investment, uncertain future for EU citizens, divided families, split communities, economic instability, tensions between the nations of the UK. This is the work of the terrible twins of divisive politics.
And I believe the former leader, Lord Ashdown, has been thinking out loud today.
Yes, he has. 3 months on since that EU referendum, he's been thinking about what it will mean for the UK and also Scotland, and whether Scotland remains part of the UK. In his words, he now believes that 3 months on, the prospects for the Union are, in his words, less dire than they were directly after that referendum. He says that he believes that any moves for a second independence referendum, Nicola Sturgeon will, in his words, try to play things long, but he does say that if Britain does not stay part of the single market, he believes that that will strengthen Nicola Sturgeon's hands in any calls for a second independence referendum in Scotland. But also looking about what will be happening at Westminster, he says depending on the way that the Brexit negotiations go, he thinks the Prime Minister could be tempted to call an early UK general election, perhaps as early as May next year.
David, many thanks. And we'll be bringing you further reports from the other Scottish political leaders as their conferences happen over the next few weeks. Now, a report has found that some of Glasgow's iconic Red Road flats withstood a blast demolition last year because they were built with steel and were too tough. An inquiry was ordered after 2 of the blocks remained partially standing following the operation last October. It said the contractor SafeDem had identified discrepancies between the construction records and the size of the steel used in the buildings. The report concluded that SafeDem had followed good practice and had been reasonable to err on the side of caution. A massive transport ship is preparing to head for Lewis to move the stricken oil rig Transocean Winner. The heavy lifting vessel, the Hawk, is due to transport the structure to Turkey for demolition. The rig ran aground on the island last month after it broke free during a tow. It's been controversial from the start, but Aberdeen City Council has announced what it hopes to do with the 500-year-old Provost Skeens House. Campaigners had been fighting to save the historic building as a controversial office and retail development is built around it. Now there are plans to create a museum celebrating famous Aberdonians. Kevin Keane has been given a guided tour.
Quietly hunkering down in the middle of this building site, Provost Skeens House holds half a millennium of history.
We're in what was the cafeteria.
Inside, little has changed since the builders moved in next door, but plans are being hatched to create a new museum here to the Aberdonians who made their mark on the world.
What we want to do is try and turn it into a people who's who from Aberdeen, people that were out into the big world and made a huge difference. And that can be through science, it can be through food, it can be through music, sport, and it's about connecting the relevance of them to people who live in Aberdeen and visit Aberdeen today.
The city's affections for this building span the decades and the centuries. The late Queen Mother visited in 1953 to mark a previous refurbishment. This time almost £2 million will be used to make it attractive to a 21st century visitor. But there have been protests about the effect Marshall Square will have on Provoskeen's house as it nestles between the tall structures.
Well, you use the word nestled and I would use the word entombed. I think that this is not sympathetic. To be fair, we've never had a very good view of Provoskeen's house since the 1960s, but it certainly wasn't the density that we're seeing at the moment, which really detracts from the whole area.
Plans are now being drawn up about which Aberdeen notables will feature in these historic rooms and how the 16th and 21st centuries can sit comfortably together.
It doesn't look great in the middle of a building site, but will it look impressive when it's all finished?
It will, because we're going to have baronial gardens round it. We'll have the historic arch, you know, so you come into it through that, and you'll be able to see through lots of other on the ground floor glass buildings, and the thing that will catch your eye will be the gardens, will be Provoskeen's house.
The aim is to have the refurbished museum finished and ready for when Marshall Square opens in less than a year's time. Kevin Keane reporting, Scotland, Aberdeen.
Accusations of homophobic language have been made after a satirical rap song was performed on Sunday at an independence convention. The all-female group What's Her Face impersonated female Scottish political leaders, using a word considered by some to be offensive to gay women. John McManus's report contains some language you may find controversial.
Westminster, you haven't even wet your whistle. I'm the party fed on nagging, that just gristle.
This was the satirical rap sketch that was performed at the Scottish Independence Convention on Sunday. Singers representing Scotland's female political leaders struck the stage, making political jokes and innuendo.
Yo, yo, yo! Listen up! You're about to get hit with the whip from the cabinet.
What's caused controversy, though, is that the Ruth Davidson character is introduced as Ruth Dykey D. The question is it offensive? The SNP MP Joanna Cherry, who's a lesbian, was at the event and called the song hilarious on social media. But Conservative MSP Annie Wells, also gay, disagrees and has written to Miss Cherry asking her to apologise.
There's no way, we're trying to, at this day and age, trying to educate and have inclusive education for children within our schools, yet we've got a Member of Parliament saying that that was okay, it was hilarious and it was just satire. And it certainly wasn't.
Ruth Davidson recently announced that she was engaged to her partner Jennifer Wilson, but she's made jokes about lesbians as well. The Labour and Green parties also have gay leaders, but Stonewall Scotland says homophobic language can still be heard in Scotland's classrooms and workplaces. Not everyone, though, thinks that language leads to discrimination.
I think there's a real problem that we've lost the distinction between words and actions. There is a difference between people saying things or cracking crude jokes and people being violent, and we should get back to recognising there is a great difference and one does not directly lead to the other.
Joanna Cherry MP has now issued a response to the criticism, saying, I saw yesterday's performance as a satirical comedy sketch written by lesbian women and performed by lesbian women, which mocked representatives of all political parties, including the SNP. In that context, I do not believe it was intended to be offensive, but I do understand why some find it to be. Miss Cherry says she regrets the offence that was caused and will continue to champion gay rights. John McManus, reporting Scotland.
You're watching BBC Reporting Scotland. It's 17 minutes to 7. A reminder of tonight's top stories. ScotRail and the RMT agree on a deal to end the dispute over driver-only operated trains. And still to come, Rangers suspend Joey Barton for 3 weeks following a training ground argument. A small number of children from the Angus area have been quarantined in hospital as investigations continue into an outbreak of E. coli 0157. NHS Tayside says they're being treated within a dedicated area of Ninewells Hospital in Dundee. Some of the children are confirmed to have the infection, while others are suspected cases. The Health Board says it can't disclose the number of cases to protect patient confidentiality. A vigil will be held outside the Central Mosque in Edinburgh following an attack on the building yesterday. Police are investigating a hate crime in which an object was thrown, causing minor fire damage to a door. The vigil has been called by Edinburgh Against Fascism and will feature speeches from local councillors and a minute's silence in solidarity. Scottish Paralympians are on their way home from Rio after helping to ensure these Paralympics were a great success from a British point of view. Paralympics GB surpassed their medal tally from London 4 years ago, and the Scots competing in Team GB did likewise. Our reporter Jane Lewis joins us now.
Thank you, Laura. Well, the Paralympics in Rio came to an end overnight with a closing ceremony at the Maracanã Stadium marking the end of 11 days of action across 22 sports. Paralympics GB won 147 medals, including 64 goals. You can see it there, making these Paralympics their most successful since Seoul 1988. And the Scots competing for Paralympics Team GB played their part in that, contributing to the tally. Scottish para-athletes won 17 medals, 5 gold, 8 silver and 4 bronze across 5 sports. Well, visually impaired sprinter Libby Clegg had a great game. She was crowned a double Paralympic champion, while 16-year-old Maria Lyle from Dunbar won 3 medals, and swimmer Andrew Mullen also bagged a hat-trick of para medals. Tennis player Gordon Reid won para gold in the singles and silver in the doubles. Now, Andy Murray has always been a big inspiration of Reid's, and that proved the case again in Rio.
Yeah, there's a photo of him actually from London from 2012 with his gold medal, which is the last one you see just before you enter the court. So I kind of had a little glance up to that every day before I had a match, and yeah, he inspires me. You know, he's an incredible athlete and you know, a true professional, and obviously he comes from the same part of the world as me. So you know, it was amazing that what he did, and you know, a real honour for me to be able to emulate his success on the same court.
Well, like Gordon Reid, the majority of the Scots on Paralympics GB are on world-class programmes run by UK Sports, or are entitled to a share of the funding from that body in the build-up to Rio. And Paralympic sport received an increase in funding in that cycle ahead of those games. Over the 4 years leading to Rio, UK Sports invested just over £70 million into Paralympic sports, a 43% rise in funding from the previous 4-year cycle.
Each of those athletes will receive a living award and a competition award, and if you put that together, that allows them to be full-time athletes in the main. What our job is here in Scotland is to produce that pathway that allows the next generation of talent to get into those programmes, and we invested £60 million in the same cycle to add to that UK total, which takes things forward.
Well, unlike UK Sports, Sports Scotland integrate that £60 million funding you heard mentioned there across Olympic and Paralympic sports. They say after the success of both games in Rio, from a Scottish point of view, the next step is to carry out a review as they look to setting their funding for the next 4 years. Laura.
Thank you. Now for a look at other stories from across the country. MSPs are to question the UK Work and Pensions Secretary about the Tory government's approach to welfare. Damien Green will appear before Holyrood's Social Security Committee in early November. It comes as Scotland prepares to set up its own social security framework after taking on extra welfare powers from Westminster. Restorers working on the reconstruction of the fire-damaged Glasgow School of Art have been given access to Charles Rennie Mackintosh's original plans in their new home at the Kelvin Hall. They say the documents are proving vital for the rebuilding work.
We're actually seeing him thinking out loud on these drawings. So there's pencil marks, annotations, crossings out, rubbings out. So we're seeing things that he thought about, decided to do, maybe thought not a good idea. And for us, it's essential because we have to get under the skin of that man to understand exactly what was in his head when he was designing that building.
The stars of the musical Five Guys Named Mo have helped launch the plans for Edinburgh's Christmas celebrations. Attractions in East Princes Street Gardens and St Andrews Square will be complemented by new additions in the West End and George Street. 10,000 free tickets will be given to children for the ice rink, which is returning to St Andrews Square.
But it's also about what it does and what it says about the city at this time of year. You know, we're a city of 500,000 people, but we're actually up there in terms of Christmas and Hogmanay with the Berlins, the Londons, the Rio de Janeiros, and we're proud of that and we want to maintain it, and that does require investment.
The world's leading experts on canals are gathering in Inverness this week. The 4-day conference will take place on the banks of the Caledonian Canal. Delegates will discuss how canals can be used as a tool in urban regeneration, as well as the opportunities available for sustainable tourism. The Countess of Wessex is cycling a 450-mile palace-to-palace ride starting from the Palace of Holyrood House to Buckingham Palace. Prince Philip and her husband Prince Edward, the Earl of Wessex, waved the Countess off as she began her bike ride in support of the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme's 60th anniversary. Rangers have suspended their footballer Joey Barton for 3 weeks. It follows a training ground dispute with his teammates and his manager last week and a meeting this morning at Ibrox. The 34-year-old came to Glasgow this summer in one of Scottish football's most high-profile transfers. Here's our senior football reporter, Chris McLaughlin.
The usual procession of sports cars at the Rangers training ground this morning, but one was missing. A few miles south, Joey Barton was in a meeting here to discuss his future after being told to stay away following a heated training ground argument last week. Minutes after he emerged, a club statement reading, "Joey Barton has today been suspended by the club and will not return to Ibrox or Auchenhowie, the training ground, for a period of 3 weeks. The manager, Mark Warburton, and the club believe that time and space is required for both the club and the player to assess what has happened. Neither party will make any further comment on the issue." That could be interesting in itself, though. The midfielder releases a book on Thursday. The title, No Nonsense. He has a number of TV and radio commitments in the next 48 hours to promote it.
It's Ferguson, it's brilliant!
More than likely the end of the road, according to one former captain.
Joey's outspoken. Probably knew that when Rangers were getting when they were signing with Joey. So, in terms of him been suspended for 3 weeks, I'm surprised at that. I don't know what's going to happen after it. It looks to me that maybe his Rangers career's over now.
Mark Warburton bought Joey Barton in the summer to add experience, but also to send a message out to Scottish football that after years of turmoil here, Rangers could still attract the big names. Some said it was a bold move, others said it was a gamble. No matter who is right and who is wrong, just weeks after arriving here, Joey Barton's future at this club looks increasingly in doubt. Chris McLaughlin, reporting Scotland, Ibrox Stadium.
One of Scotland's Olympic gold medalists has had his stolen medical files made public by hackers. The cyclist Callum Skinner, who won gold and silver in Rio, is among numerous athletes to have their records posted on the Fancy Bears website. It says he was granted an exemption to use the banned substance prednisolone in 2014. There's no suggestion Skinner has been involved in any wrongdoing. A man from Orkney is gearing up to tackle his 100th ultramarathon. William Sichel, who's in his 60s, was inspired to take up the sport after he found he had just too much left in the tank after the standard 26.2 miles. If successful, he'll join a very small group of people worldwide who've reached the milestone. David Deldee has the story.
Meet the man who found a marathon simply too short. 20 years since his first ultramarathon, this weekend William Sichel will be looking to complete his 100th. During that time, he's tackled everything from a mere 40 kilometres all the way up to the world's longest certified race, some 3,100 miles. The oldest man ever to complete it, he puts that down as his biggest challenge overcome.
I went into areas mentally I'd never been before. It was the demands of the event. You have to start at 6 every morning, you finish at midnight. You can go home early if you want, but obviously that leaves you less time to do the distance. It's on a lap course on an open street circuit in Queens in New York. It was noisy with the heat and humidity. I was a little bit homesick. This one here, that's from the Badwater Ultra Marathon. That's the world's hottest ultra, 135 miles.
Taking up the sport at 40, Williams amassed 18 race wins and 183 records at world, British and Scottish level, all from his base on the small island of Sandy in Orkney. A battle with cancer in the late 90s survived. This weekend, the fight is against a 24-hour road race in Switzerland, a century in sight. In total, Williams run a staggering 20,000 miles in races. Add that to a further 57,000 in training, and it's the equivalent of going around the world 3 times. During that period, he's gone through 150 pairs of socks and 65 pairs of trainers. Yet, despite the fact he's approaching pension age, there's no sign of retirement for the 62-year-old.
Absolutely not. I do wake up every morning, look at my birth certificate. I'm in good health. I'm fighting fit, loving every minute of it and learning how to do it and doing well at it. Why would I want to retire?
David Daly reporting Scotland, Orkney.
Now here's Graham Stewart with details of tonight's Scotland 2016.
The dream will never die, said Alex Salmond, but 2 years on from the referendum, are the prospects for Scottish independence any brighter? Will we be asked to vote a second time? And if so, how soon? We'll debate over on BBC Two at 10:30.
Now, a new list of names has been revealed by the Met Office. It includes Penelope, Malcolm, Wilbert and Fleur. Oh, and not forgetting Dorothy and Angus too. No, they're not weather presenters or news presenters. They're the names to be used for storms when they happen this winter. Christopher is here. My name's not there, I noticed. How do they choose the names, Chris?
They're all suggestions by members of the general public, actually, Laura. And they compile these lists, and that's what we've got for this winter. We saw 11 named storms last winter. Thankfully, our first one, no signs of that yet. And they're only named when the impacts are deemed severe enough. But you're right, no Laura or Christopher, but there is a Jackie on there. Hello there. It is pretty settled weather across the country at the moment. So here's the satellite picture from earlier. You can see the cloud bubbling up through the course of the day, and this was the scene in Ullapool under blue skies. Lovely picture there from one of our weather watchers. Tonight it's dry and the cloud tending to melt away to give some long clear spells, so quite a cool night. Winds generally light away from the west coast where they're backing southerly and freshening for a time. Temperatures in towns and cities 9 or 10 degrees, cooler in the countryside, a few spots in the northeast, down to a chilly 2 or 3. Tomorrow, there is a weather front out in the Atlantic, but staying there for most, so it's another dry and bright day for many. Any early mist patches will quickly lift, and then, like today, the cloud will tend to bubble up and build through the course of the day, but still some bright or sunny spells to be had. So by mid-afternoon, say around 4 o'clock, we're looking at temperatures of 15 to 17 Celsius with generally light winds. A touch fresher, though, to the west and northwest with more cloud here, 1 or 2 light showers. But as I say, for most, it's a dry day with some decent spells of sunshine on offer. Now, the rest of the afternoon into the evening, and those showers in the northwest will merge to give a longer spell of rain at times. And that is the start of the next system arriving as we head overnight in towards Wednesday. We can see on the pressure chart there, connected to this area of low pressure, that rain just edging its way in, giving a spell of wet and windy weather through the Hebrides and west coast come Wednesday. Elsewhere, it's a dry, brightish start, but probably cloudier than today and indeed tomorrow. And by mid to late afternoon, that wet weather then starts to edge its way inland, travelling east across the country, so a spell of rain for all. It's gone by Thursday to leave another reasonably dry and bright day, but it will be breezy from the south and again a number of showers in the west. Then looking ahead towards the end of the week, well, weather systems arriving in off the Atlantic, so a fairly unsettled theme, quite breezy if not windy at times around the west coast, and also really quite wet as we start the weekend too. That's the forecast for now.
I'll be back with the headlines at 8 and the late bulletin just after 10 o'clock. I hope you can join me then. From all of us, good night, bye-bye.